So a lot has been going on in the world today. If you haven't done so already, I'm sure you've seen or heard this.
Gambling with World War III.
Quite fascinating, right? And I also came across this.
The 68 black countries in the world, the largest
Interesting,
continent
right?
by number of countries.
And then
Not a single
I
one
was
of
just
them
like,
has a
I began to
nuclear
wonder.
weapon.
Some things came up in my mind. So this whole talk about World War III and stuff, just like it's like, okay. Now, as someone who is very Pan-African in my mindset, I began to think. I'm like, wait. Now, I said, was Africa involved in World War One? Yes, Africa was greatly impacted in World War One. It's not really talked about because, of course, nothing is really ever talked about that much. But yeah, Africa was involved and hugely impacted in World War One, especially when it comes to because that was during the colonial time. So most African soldiers fought with the Europeans and French soldiers. So, Africa was like it was devastating on the population because various African soldiers had to fight with their colonial masters during that time, and so it had a toll on the continent, and in Africa also was involved in World War Two. Now World War Two was a bit different because it mostly kind of affected northern African countries. I believe countries like Algeria, Morocco, and those countries were mainly impacted. Libya, Tunisia, Egypt. The northern side of the continent was mostly impacted by World War Two. And again, also many African soldiers from the British and French colonies fought alongside their European allies in various campaigns. But the thing with World War II is that it impacted the colonization because the Europeans exposed themselves to their vulnerabilities. So most African countries took advantage of that. And then there was a wave of decolonization that happened on the continent. So World War II brought about that. Why am I blabbing about World War One and World War Two? Now, again, no one wants war. Wars are never good. They're never something that you want. But I'm just curious of certain things when it comes to World War, especially as Trump was speaking to Zelensky and he talked about, you're trying to bring about World War Three. And one thing that came into my mind is that, World War One, World War Two was fought back in the days, but we're getting to the time in the world stage where wars are going to be more AI, wars are going to be more nuclear, God forbid, and wars are going to be more advanced equipment and technologies that are going to be used to fight, right? And is Africa prepared for a World War Three? Because now you're no longer a colony of European or French countries. You're separate states on a continent, separate countries. Are you ready if there was a World War III? It's kind of thought process. And why am I thinking about this? So, for example, if you saw in one of those clips I said, there's no African country that has nuclear weapons. And there's a reason for this, right? So Africa is seen as a nuclear weapons free zone because all the countries signed a treaty called the Pelindaba Treaty, which the name is gotten from an area where South Africa is the only African country that ventured into developing nuclear weapons, but it was seized, and hence the treaty was signed and was named after the area where South Africa was doing all these things, right? So Africa is a nuclear weapons free zone. However, other countries like Russia, the US, China, France, the UK, Pakistan, India, and Israel have nuclear weapons, and Africa doesn't. Can somebody explain to me why these countries have nuclear weapons, but a whole continent is a nuclear weapons free zone. Now, I'm not advocating for nuclear weapons. I'm just curious to know why Africa is left so vulnerable and other parts of the world have access to this kind of weapons to protect themselves in case of incasities. I'm just curious to know, does somebody have an explanation as to why? Is there a reason why Africa is so vulnerable? Is there a reason why Africa is a nuclear weapons free zone and Europe is not, and the Americas are not, Asia is not? Why Africa alone? It's important to know. It's important to know. Someone please enlighten us on why Africa is a nuclear weapons free zone. Again, I'm not advocating for nuclear weapons. It's nonsense. It shouldn't be. But if there's no nuclear weapons, no country should be allowed to have nuclear weapons. No country, no population is better than the other population. Why are some countries allowed to have nuclear weapons and other countries aren't allowed to have? What are those countries doing with the nuclear weapons? Why should they have it? No country should be having nuclear weapons at all. Every country should be signing no nuclear weapon treaties. So the fact that some countries are allowed to have nuclear weapons and a whole continent doesn't have, it's mind-boggling. It rings some bells, and I would like to know exactly why Africa is a nuclear weapons free zone.
It'd be great if everybody would get rid of their nuclear weapons. You know, we have Russia and us have by far the most. China will have an equal amount within 4 or 5 years. And it would be great if we could all denuclearize, because the power of nuclear weapons is crazy. It is crazy.